There we go. Welcome to another episode of Deer Talk Now. I am Dan Schmidt. I am here with Brad Rucks. Brad, 16 years ago, we started this podcast. Can you believe that?
No, unbelievable.
16 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be doing anything but a podcast. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. Brad and I are going to be coming at you. It is April. Ish, and we're going to be talking about food plots. That's what everybody's getting looking forward to. I know people have been shed hunting, people have been doing some other things, scouting, cutting shooting lanes, getting blinds and stand areas prepped. But the big thing for a lot of hunters, especially if you have a little piece of private ground or if you have access to private ground, is you want to provide food for deer. And Brad, the first question is the easy one. Well, they're all going to be easy ones, I think, for you. But the first one is, what are your first steps? I'm going to make that plural. When you're looking to create a brand new food plot strategy?
Well, two things. One is, are you hunting on your place that already has food plots established, or is this a brand new, like the lease? Where are we going to put those plots? If it's that, it's entirely different, right? Now I'm looking at the topography of the territory, just trying to figure out where it's flat, which way the deer are going to move or which way I think they're going to move, and literally plan out where I'm going to put that food plot.
So you're doing that mostly based off of hunting aspects.
True.
Yes, we want to get food there, but so you're looking at bedding areas, travel corridors, things like that before you even start looking at anything.
Yeah, exactly. Follow the trail system, find out where the deer are bedding, follow it back, see where they're actually feeding in the egg fields. And I always like to try to get my food plots in between those two things, right? Because the deer are going to, sooner or later, they're not going to sit in your food plot all night long. They're going to go to those bigger fields if you're in a spot where you have agriculture like we are here in central Wisconsin. If you're in northern Wisconsin, it's a different game, right? Not now my food plot is the destination. So
right.
A little bit different strategy as well.
And that's what we should preface this podcast with, is that we're talking about most guys and gals, they want more hunting opportunities at deer, so they want to be bringing deer in. They obviously want to feed them, but if you're talking about just a maintenance program for food plots, that would be a different podcast, because Correct. Then we would be looking at, massive amounts of food. And what I mean by that is like many, many, many acres rather than little micro plots or, small kill plots. One thing I know that you and I have talked about a lot, and it's something that you really need to keep in mind, is you kind of identify an area that you want to put food plots, but sun exposure is key, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. For not only the plants themselves, you want to make sure that they have a long enough growing season, but it's also which way you're going to put your stands. Is it a morning food plot or is it an afternoon? Because that kind of dictates where I want to put my blinds. I always want to make sure the sun's behind me, right? So the deer, if he looks up, all they see is the sun, right? It kind of has that opportunity to hide you. So that's kind of my strategy. The other thing is, like, if you're looking for a brand new spot, make sure it's flat. If you're on that hillside, what happens is, a lot of the seeds are planted relatively shallow in the soil. And if you get a hard rain, all the seed just runs down to that low side.
And it doesn't take much.
No, not at all.
Yep.
I mean, I think you experience a little bit of that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a key thing. And I find it funny that I'm saying this, but you're actually thinking more in terms of killing them than I am, because with sun, I am mostly, I'm going to say 90% worried about getting that seed not only to sprout and germinate and grow, but so the plant itself, that's the gardener in me.
Yeah. The
plant needs X amount of hours of daylight.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if you're planting a tomato or if you're planting chicory. That plant needs sunlight. And for me, the biggest waste of time that I've seen over the years is you find this spot, this great place to kill a deer, but it's surrounded by pine trees or something else. Pines adding acidity into the soil, and it's shading it.
Yeah.
So that makes it hard.
Or big maples, whatever. If it's a leafy area, you're right. I mean, if the only sun that it's going to get is directly over the top, that plot's not probably going to do well. So and there's things you can do. There's blends of seeds that do a little bit better in shady, areas. But again, if you got good sun, it just opens up your palette or options, for your food plots.
Okay, so then the next thing that I'm going to ask you, I know what you're going to say because we've worked together for 30 years, but on any given property, how do you go about determining the size and the shape of a brand new food plot?
Well, for me, size really is determined on the lay of the land, right? Because I'd like to get it as big as possible. Now, I'm not saying I want a 20-acre field, but if I can get an acre and a half, I'm all about trying to get that plot that size. What I like about it is it gives you the option to try to put a little bit more of a blend of seeds in there to hold deer through the entire season. Because as a hunter, you got to determine when you're going to hunt. Like you and I, we're going to go through the entire season, but we're not the average person, right? Some people don't like to go early in the season because the mosquitoes are bad or whatever it is. I mean, they got their reasons, or they only want to see the rut activity, so they only hunt during the rut. Therefore, if you're one of those type of hunters, know when you're going to hunt, because that dictates what you're going to plant. If it's early season, you want green food, right? And if it's later in the season, you want brassicas or mature soybeans, or, it's a different type of seed that you want. So, but what I like to do is figure out what my area in the food plot is. And then I always want it to neck down because, as you know, I have kids that hunted for years. And I always wanted to make it so it's a bow shot, and not just any bow shot, not a shot 30 or 40 yards that you and I can make. I want it right in that sweet spot, 20 yards. I want the deer to come through at 20 yards because it's not too close, it's not too far away. It's easy shot pretty much for anybody. So I like to use dog legs. And what a dog leg does, it's just like a boomerang, and it'll keep the deer no matter where they enter. If they enter on the other side of the boomerang from me and they can't see my side of the boomerang, that buck, even during early season, will probably take a little wander and come over and check it out. So that's kind of my strategy. There's hourglass, there's lots of different sizes that you can make, or you can actually fill it in with rocks or sticks or any of that stuff as well to kind of funnel the deer in.
So on the size, you're talking acreage, half acre, quarter acre, 1 acre. You got to understand how big that is. 1 acre is an entire football field, including the sidelines.
Yes.
And that is a big food plot.
That's a big food plot.
What about people who don't have that, who are planning a food plot? You guys can't see it, or obviously can't see it if you're just listening to this podcast. But the size of this room, which is maybe 20 by 50.
Yeah, not even a quarter acre.
It's small. I mean, so. Is it a waste of time to plant those plots?
No, I mean, the thing to keep in mind is if you're in a smaller area, right, you want a plant that continues to grow. You don't want to put something in there that like buckwheat. And I know we planted buckwheat once before. Dan had a great looking plot. I mean, it was fabulous, fantastic. And it was a third of an acre at least, if not a little bit more than that. And how long did you get to hunt it?
A week?
Yeah. Basically, it matured, right? And the deer, as soon as it matured, boom, they just gravitated toward it, ate it to the ground.
Oh, and it was like Kmart parking lot after that.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Ian, you filmed me kill a deer out of there, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so it was... actually, 2. We could go off on a story on there. The one monster doe that took us a long way into the night.
The mile-long track.
Mile-long track, and Ian was fresh here.
First time.
Yep,
nice.
And he had to. Well, I shouldn't say had to, but he did. He dragged them both out. Yes. So my point there was, and it's something Steve often talks about. One thing that Steve turned me on, you did too. But like when you get those smaller plots, it's not as exciting to say, I'm planting cereal, rye, and oats. But you know what? It works because it keeps growing and the deer are going to keep eating it.
Yeah, the beauty there is, like you can, if you're worried about the earlier in the season, you put oats in it, right? And then you can overseed those oats when they're almost mature and put in your winter wheat or winter rye. And now you got a green field. You had it all green from August all the way through the end of December, right? So the entire hunting season. Or clovers are a great option for the guys in the South, right? We're a little bit too north. Not that the deer don't love it. They absolutely do. But as soon as it turns brown, in November when you really want to hunt, during the peak of the rut, a lot of times our clover is brown and they don't really eat it. They'll eat it to the ground and, then it's one of those stagnant plots. But
So are you not planting any, beets or other brassicas in smaller plots?
no, normally I don't, unless it is, a lot of times we'll have a small plot with a little bit bigger plot. Like normally my turnip plots, the smallest ones are about a third of an acre. Again, it's just because of the browse pressure. And then I like to have, like even in that acre area that we talked about before, I'd almost rather make a clover leaf into that plot and have 3 different things in there, because then you can get away with putting turnips in there because they won't eat them when they first come out of the ground. They'll leave them alone because they prefer to eat Australian winter peas or clover or so many of those early season blends, buckwheat. They like to eat that stuff, so that'll allow the other stuff to grow. The big thing is with turnips, and this, everybody says softball-sized turnips. I like my turnips to be baseball-sized to softball-size. That seems to be the perfect spot.
And then radishes, too, which are smaller, but they love those as well.
Yeah, and the beauty of the radish is, unlike the turnips, where if they eat the tops off the turnips, the bulb stops growing, where radish just continues to grow. That's why, I think my deer really prefer turnips, but I plant as much radishes just because of that growth factor. It just gives them another protein source, and it continues to grow.
Beets too.
Beets.
They really produce.
Beets.
Now everybody, like I said, people, you get enamored with the bulb or the vegetable that you're growing, but it's the leafy green vegetation that you really want, because that's going to keep them coming back. And whether it's a turnip or a beet or a radish, if that's in the ground, they're going to be eating that well after hunting season anyways.
Yeah, and I know you use some rack fuel, right? With the beets in there.
Oh my gosh. The blend, and this is not a gratuitous plug. I'm just telling you because I've used it and that. The blends that they have and the seeds that they, I don't know how they source those seeds, but it's a very high-end process. Excellent germination, and the production is phenomenal. And they call it graze tolerant. So the deer are, on a brassica deer, a lot of times brassica eats that top off, boom, that plant is dead.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a dirt field after a while, especially if you have a lot of deer. And I know, there's a couple listeners that actually sent in questions here in the past couple weeks that have been planting food plots in northern Minnesota, which is very difficult because there's no natural foods really. The browse situation up there is pretty squalid,
sure.
And the mast situation is iffy at best. But they find out that graze pressure is a key factor.
Sure.
Especially if they just want to gun hunt, and now you're looking into November. Yeah. That's a long ways from planting that in. Let's just say you even planted it in August. That's a long ways to go before you start getting some decent food. The other thing I want to add on to that, Brad, before the next question, and I know I harp on this a lot, but really learn, if you're doing this for the first time or you're kind of new to it, find out exactly very close to what the tonnage you're getting off of the property that you're planting. I don't think that can be emphasized enough.
No, you mentioned one thing, and I just want to go to that graze pressure. A lot of times us new people that get into food plots, right, you plant something and you're expecting it to grow this tall, and what you don't realize is there's so much deer eating it, and the pressure is so insane that it literally never gets above this. So put a little cage, container on there. Yep. All you needed is a little circle of a foot, two by 2, right? 2 feet by 2 feet, so that the deer can't get at it. And then you can really monitor what's growing and what's not, because you can see that stuff just shooting up, and the deer will keep the rest of it mowed down. It's just a great way to make sure that the deer are eating your plot and that the plant is really growing.
Dear friend of ours, Craig Doherty, rest his soul, he said this probably 25 years ago. And this is 25 years ago. He said, we've become really good at planting food and growing food, but the next step is really learning how to hunt those deer. And it goes to your point there is you probably read so much about this. I'm talking to the listeners. And you plant these plots and you think you had a plot failure. To Brad's point, you probably didn't. If you had an exclosure cage there, you're going to see what that plot should have looked like. Yep. And then you have to understand the pressure that you're putting on that land. If you have some piddly little 50-acre property that's surrounded by DNR land and neighbors, all those deer are pounding your food plots at night.
Yeah.
And you didn't realize that they just ate up all the food. It's almost impossible to hunt it.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially for anything other than a yearling buck or something. I mean, it's really, really difficult. The other thing I was going to add to the point that you said about shapes, and you know our friend who taught us this, southern gentleman, you talked about spokes, and I actually wrote an article about this in Deer and Deer Hunting. This was a long time ago, too, but it was called Spokes for Success for Food Plots. So if you can imagine, excuse me, if you have a elevated blind and you're hunting, whether it's with a gun or a bow or crossbow or whatever, and you just think of a wagon wheel, and that's what he did. And then he did those little wagon wheels maybe, it was in CRP, so you didn't have a lot of competition from trees for sunlight. And I would say there was probably 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 spokes going out. And he did every one of those spokes in something different. So one might have been cereal rye and oats. One might have been clover. One might have been some brassicas. And lo and behold, oh my gosh. Especially with that CRP, which was, I don't think it was switchgrass. It was something else. Chest high. Those deer couldn't see where they're coming in. And during the rut, it was dynamite.
Yeah.
So that's a really neat little option when you're talking about shapes.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing that I like about that is, you have that variety of seeds, but you can actually hunt over all of it, right? Because I can't tell you how many times we're hunting a plot where the deer were in last night. They all came out to the turnip field, and you're just expecting them to all come out there again, right? And we got another plot, and it's close enough to shoot to. But for the kids, it's a little bit longer. It probably turns that 100-yard shot at the max into a 150, 200-yard shot. And the next night, they determine they're all going to eat winter wheat, winter rye, and they all just pound that plot. And it's like, here I sit on the big lush plot they were in the night before, and I don't know what really triggers them. You can say pressure, but we don't really pressure our deer that much. So I just think, wherever that first deer seems to come out, that's where all the deer gravitate, because once they can see one deer in a food plot, the rest know it's safe, and they just seem to funnel that direction.
Great point. Okay, so now we're getting back to the original discussion here. After clearing that ground, you've identified, you're working on some leased ground here. After clearing that ground for a new food plot, how can you utilize excess brush to your advantage?
Yeah, so brush or rocks, you can build, a wall up, right? So that you force the deer closer to your stand or to only enter that food plot in certain areas. We did it back on Tiger Ridge, remember, with a rock wall, and you can do it with brush. So if you have that brush, you can easily manipulate it so that you create those travel corridors closer to your deer stands.
You can, and you better be meticulous with it, because if you don't think a deer can squirt through a little area, they can, and they'll figure that out in a hurry, especially if you're not careful with how you're hunting those stands.
Yeah.
They're going to, especially those bucks, they're going to figure out how they can get in and out of there, and that might cause another wrinkle. To add on to your point about excess brush, think about that as cover. Because especially if you're in an area, let's just talk about the lease that you're working on. You pile up a bunch of brush, you think, oh, this is going to be great. Well, that brush is going to rot and melt down pretty quickly. But if you have, even if it's an invasive species like a Japanese barberry or a bush honeysuckle or even buckthorn, we say those are just terrible. But if you have a lot of brush or treetops or things like that you've dropped, that stuff starts growing through. Or even if you get the preferred species like berry brush, it's awesome. Or other things that a deer are actually browsing on. Now you've created extra cover, and that security cover is going to help you when you're hunting those food plots. I just talked to our friend down here 20 miles south of us, and he's doing that along some wide open woodlots that have been so decimated with deer browse over the past 40 years.
Yeah. Building
that brush layer up. Don't worry about that. It's kind of like the dirty edges of the food plot, they might call it.
Yep.
Extra cover. Maybe that staging area becomes a little bit closer to the food as you're hunting, especially Halloween into November.
Which makes perfect sense. The other thing you can do to make those plots better, if you cannot utilize any brush or any of the natural habitat, give the deer a better trail coming in and out of. I mean, you can use your ATV and just, if you're in an area, you can use it on private ground. Just drive back a little bit, wind a trail through, and almost all the deer that hit that ATV trail, or you can use your weed eater as well, will follow that right into your food plot. We call it the chute, like we'll take the tractor with the brush hog and we'll back it out of the food plot as far as possible and just give the deer a nice mowed trail. And deer are lazy animals, right? I mean, if they can come to a plot, the easiest way is what they're going to do. And why it's really good for the bucks during the rut is the bucks love to run down those because there's so many other trails that cross it, right? So they're scent checking every trail. And yeah, you might lose a buck if one was coming in and hits a hot doe that didn't come in, but you're probably going to lose that buck anyway. So they're going to utilize those, come right in your food plot again, and give you another shot opportunity.
You have that happen a lot, though, by where you hunt. You have bucks actually using those highways that you create, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. So it goes back from when we first got a 3-wheeler back in 1989, I think it was. And,
those were death traps.
Yeah, but we're using it because now we no longer had to walk way back in the woods. I was using it. We made trails when you're hanging up tree stands and doing all that stuff. I made the mistake the first couple of years, and it took me a while to figure it out. We'd drive right up to the tree, right? Like right underneath the tree. Well, here you're hunting, and the deer, you're watching them. They're following that trail, only they never give you a shot, right? They're coming straight in. They go right underneath the tree stand and right out the backside. And I'm like, oh, my God, I can manipulate deer movement. All I need to do is, and then we learned, so we started putting that trail at 20 yards, 25 yards. And, yeah, it worked like a charm, only some of the bucks didn't like it. A buck doesn't like to be able to see so far in front of them. Mm-hmm. So we started winding them. And from the tree stand, 22 feet up in the air, you can see the whole thing. But when you're on the ground, you can only see, 8, 12 feet in front of you. And that's what the bucks love. If you just wind it a little bit, just keep on going on a winding trail, they'll come in from the egg field in some of those spots, and we can watch them for, 500 yards and follow that trail all the way down. Just continue all the way through and come right through next year.
I know it works great here. I was going to just be a little bit of counter on you because, I've hunted a lot of public land. I've hunted a lot of small properties over the years. One thing I found is, yes, it helps funnel deer, but mostly it's the antlerless segment and the younger deer. And those bigger bucks, for me, have always been, they cross them. But I said that's where you really got to put your scouting into high gear because normally that buck is not just following that path to your food plot. It almost never happens. What they're doing is they use those secondary trails, those tertiary trails, and they're using them, but then they cut off. Especially when they're scent checking, they would like that real nice security. But the point that you bring up with S shapes and things like that, it helps. And I know that there's a lot of guys that we know that do it in the industry that are hunting in Missouri and Kansas and Illinois and places like that, where they are actually creating, what would you call it, like almost like a checkerboard effect to the food plots and the habitat to make those deer work a little bit harder. If that's the case, if you're in the pre-rut or the rut, or if it's just, a buck coming through there where he can't just walk in, eat, and leave, because if he's any pressure, it's during daylight, he's not going to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, next question. This is clicking along very nicely, Brad. Easy question. This came in, I believe, off of Facebook. Ian monitors these, by the way, guys. So if you're making a comment, make it. I don't care where you're listening to the podcast or watching the podcast. If it's on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, make those comments. He's keeping track of them. We put them in our queue, and then we're gonna address the questions. Here's the question. Really, seriously, how important is a soil test? Do I really need to do this every year?
It's a good idea, right? It's not that much. If you have a perfect pH, in between that 6 to 7.5, I don't think you probably have to do it the following year because it's really not going to dissipate that much. The other thing I wanted to talk about the pH is now there's so many products out there that use liquid calcium. Yep. Deer Grow is one of them. It's a great product. And now you don't have to worry about that low pH, right? Because the liquid calcium actually tricks the plant to believe that the pH is perfect. So therefore, it's getting all those nutrients. And we brought this up. Neil Doherty was the one that taught me this. He said lime is like a spigot. If it's not a perfect lime, that spigot's shut on the water hose. But if you get it the more close to neutral that lime is, or your soil is, the pH, it just opens it up. And at the perfect, it's opened all the way up. And that's what you want. Well, Deer Grow can do that by tricking the plant. So let's say I planted that brand new food plot where this is really important. You can't get enough egg lime in the first year to make that even neutral.
Maybe even by the second year.
You're probably lucky. It's going to be a 5-year project, right? Well, now you put Deer Grow in there, and now I'm not only fixing the soil, I'm actually going to be able to plant and have healthy plants.
How do you apply it? I know how you apply. I'm just asking.
Spray. It's a spray. So
but when do you, like, how big is that plant, and how are you doing it?
So on this one, you can spray it in your ground before you till if you want. You can till it in. What we normally do is have our ground tilled. Then we spray it in, and then I lightly disc just to get it worked into the ground a little bit, and then we plant. So
do you ever apply it after the plants are growing?
You could. I mean, it's not going to hurt the plants whatsoever. As long as there's dirt, you need kind of bare dirt. You want, you don't want to spray it on vegetation. Like if you're going to kill a grass, field of whatever, switchgrass, whatever you're planting, and you killed that and you mowed it to get it small, you don't want to put your Deer Grow on it and then, till it in or leave it or basically, it's got to be into the ground. So if you no-till, you definitely want to make sure you work on your pH.
We've done it down where we were planting some plots, and it really made a difference.
Oh, it's huge.
It went from we actually had 2 plots. We had one north of there and one south of there. And the north plot didn't have anything. We did add, pelletized lime, which I know takes a lot longer to dissolve into the soil. That one came in okay. It wasn't bad. But the one where we applied that, it was night and day difference.
The funny part is if you ever miss a spot with your sprayer, like especially on brassicas because they're a little bit finicky on the pH, and you'll have nice green everywhere, and then you'll have a little strip of like yellowish green. And we just missed that spot when we sprayed.
What are the problems that you've had over the years with you thought you did everything right, you thought you had decent enough moisture, and it just didn't work? What happened there?
I think some of it is we get it in too late. So in years, they say Wisconsin, we could plant all the way in August, right? The problem is in Wisconsin, if you plant it any time around the 15th, which if you're using one of the seed blends, a lot of those seed blends are telling you the 15th for Wisconsin, it's too late. Our growing days, the number of daylight hours is just too short. The plants will grow, but they're never going to get the turnips or the bulbs, and they're going to be somewhat stunted. Even on years when it's extremely warm, like last year, I'm going to give it as an example. My place was extremely wet. When I say extremely, I mean like ducks were swimming in the food plots, right, in the spring. So it took forever for it to dry out, and we were worried about getting it in. Well, at the end of July, we got a nice warm stretch, but it still was a little bit wet. I think it was August 15th is when we finally got the plots in behind my house. And the cereal grains did fine, right, because they're going to continue to grow. The brassicas, man, we didn't have a turnip on the whole place. That was, so.
You probably got some leaf production.
Exactly.
But that didn't last for very long,
no.
Especially with the number of deer. And this is, you have to, I always use that analogy. It's no different if you're planting a garden bed or this. You have to know your zone, your hardiness zone, whether you're in Kentucky or you're up here or you're somewhere out west, and you got to know what your precipitation is, and you got to pray for it, because if you don't get it, you're going to be in trouble. Okay, so August, let's just say for your purposes, August 15th was probably too late, almost definitely, to be planting a brassica type forage. What would be too early to plant something like that?
Well, two things. One is you just look at the maturity dates on a lot of that plots, right? So like if you're planting those cereal grains that you talked about, winter wheat, winter rye, you don't want to plant that in July, right? Because they like it when it's low, right? They like that new
Tender
growth.
growth,
And once it's going to start to head out, it's too late for all that. They
And
don't
then you're
like
just
it.
looking at a grass field.
Yeah, so if we're going to do that, we like to plant some oats, because oats are cheap. You can buy a bag relatively cheap. And you can just get egg oats in your Nebraska plots. Throw that in there, and then literally first weekend of July, 4th of July, so the deer have been eating it all through, earlier in the spring. I just till that under, and now it's green manure is what they're going to call it. So it's going to fertilize the soil again, because all those nutrients that were in the plant go right back into the soil, and then we plant our turnips. We try to get ours in around July 15th through to about the 21st is my sweet spot for
Okay,
turnips.
so July through August. Is there an SOS? Let me rephrase that question. What is your SOS for, I'm getting closer to September, the plots that I planted are
Correct.
not doing well. Is there something I can do to fix it?
Winter rye. I mean, rye, I tell everybody it can damn near grow in cement. I mean, you spill some winter rye on like the sandiest soil ever and it'll green up, right? So that's, and it's in a lot of those blends that you see from that are commercially made, and they put it in there just to guarantee they're going to get something green, right? I mean, they know it. We
And you're
know
just
it.
broadcasting it with a spinner.
Yeah, exactly. It just takes off if you can get it into the ground a little bit. And then if you hit it, like if it is late in the season and it starts turning green, hit it with a foliar fertilizer, which is a liquid fertilizer, and it'll shoot right up. And then you can withstand a lot of deer browse pressure on it.
Great point, Brad. Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Outdoor Edge and their new Ergomax 6-piece professional grade processing knife set. Take your wild game processing to the next level with this top-tier set, which includes 5 expertly designed knives tailored for every task. Plus, the included 2-stage sharpener ensures your blades stay incredibly sharp no matter the job. For more information, go to OutdoorEdge.com. Okay, last question. I know you did the work here, so thank you. Okay, we've done all this. We've looked at the soil. We took the test. One thing I wanted to add about your pH talk there, 6.5 to 7.5, I think is fabulous if you've got it. I mean, people get really like, I want to be perfect. We've planted plots in what, 5.2, 5.4. I mean, really
4.5.
really
Yeah,
poor pH. It still can be done.
You got to start somewhere, right? I mean, in any kind of plant that you can get the deer to eat is going to benefit you. So, yeah.
And that's in the pH level. I think you mentioned this before, but Charlie Alsheimer always told me this. He said that pH level is like that tomato you grow. You have a tomato from the store and you have a tomato from home. That really solid pH that you did, that one's better. Obviously, it tastes better. And it's the same thing with deer food. That's why you see more deer in your plot as opposed to, Joe's plot, because you did the work, he didn't. He's got some deer, he's got some food, but your food is better. And he who has the better food is going to have the deer.
Yeah, especially during peak season, right?
Exactly. Last question. Thank you, everybody, for doing this. Again, please just like and subscribe. That's all we ask you to do. And add a comment, because this really helps everybody. What strategy do you use after you've done all this when adding stands, blinds, or any other hunting location to a new plot?
So the biggest thing for me is determining when we're going to hunt it. And if in Wisconsin, right, it means anytime in the fall, west, northwest winds normally. So I try to make sure my plots are set up so that I can hunt it in a north, northwest, west, southwest. Any of those that have west or north in it, I want to be able to hunt that plot. And therefore, we always put the food, right? You're going to actually put it to the west of where you actually want to hunt. And that is just because that's the predominant wind, right? And then the other thing is I'm going to try to neck down those spots. Not that it matters so much for me, but we also do a lot of doe management, right? And a lot of times it's not myself pulling the trigger, or it's not my boys that pulled the trigger, because let's face it, we get a lot of venison, but we let other people in. Like if they have a buddy that hasn't shot a deer in a few years or ever shot a deer, hey, come on out to my place. Yep. We're going to put you in a box blind. We're going to give you a rifle that I know is dialed in, let you shoot it a couple times before you go out. And now we're going to sit so the wind's in our face and they can make a little bit of noise or do something without spooking it and harvest that animal. So that's kind of our strategy, is always know where the wind is. We like to try to get the sun behind your back, and then leave some cover. If you got a good tree, some people will take all the branches off that side of the tree that they're going to hunt in, but now you're too open. Like, just give yourself some holes that you can shoot through, because sooner or later that deer's going to come through, and there's ways to manipulate them, right? My 4x4 post with a rope or whatever, we can get that buck out in front of us. So we're going to do that to get them in front of us.
I know you've used the golden ropes from Wildlife, and those things really do work. And what you can do too, I know this is kind of geeky because we do this a lot, but you can actually position, Steve taught us that, you can position those scrape trees in a way that you've got the wind in your face, you've got the scrape tree in your favor, and you got food around you. And then when a buck's going to come in and check that, and they do check them all year round, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be pre-rut. They're gonna be hitting those all year round. Best of both worlds. But the biggest, I guess, tip of advice that I could add to what he just said is approach this like you are not hunting food plots. Approach this like you are an old stump sitter just trying to figure out deer behavior and how they're going to be reacting to that property. So pretend you're up in the Bibbin Swamp or something like that, and you're trying to figure out how these deer are out. Where am I going to place my stand so I'm going to have best odds if that deer's coming through this trail? Same thing with food. And then if that wind is not favorable, if that wind is out of the east, don't hunt that stand. Because you blow them out of there once, you educate them no different than if you were educating them over a spin feeder in Texas, or if you were educating them up north where you don't have all these extra things going for you, like scrape trees and food plots and nice access and exit routes to your stands. Keep those things in mind. I think it's going to really help you out.
The other thing you mentioned, bucks will hit the rope. Does do too, and I know you know that. But even if you're doe harvesting and you have that structure out in front of your stand, not every doe that comes in the plot's going to come over and check it out. But if you got 10 deer, one of those does is probably going to come through and check out that rope, even if it's just to smell it quickly. Again, it's just giving you another opportunity to shoot a deer. Okay,
one last question. What is your strategy on hunting does over in food plots?
I don't think there's a bad time. If my freezer's empty and it's opening day of the season, I'm going to shoot one. If it's opening day, I'm probably going to shoot one in the morning, because most of those deer coming in off the egg fields, we're in a unique spot. Normally, I know a lot of people don't hunt in the mornings. We can get behind them. So if the deer are coming in from the west, I can come in from more on the east side, southeast, and loop around them without them ever scaring. So for me, we can kill those does, and then we just sit right on top of the food plot. And I have a lot of food plots that are right off the egg fields, because it seems like as soon as those deer start migrating off those fields, we give them a nice little lane again to walk down, and it dumps right into my food plot. And I'd say if there's 12 deer that are using that big egg field, 10 of them are going to come in my food plot before they disseminate.
Do you even care about the age structure?
I really don't. Any doe is a good one. I mean, I know the strategy, I know the thinking behind it, but if I like eating the younger ones, to be honest with you, and I know, you can say, well, she's going to be your future breeder. Well, we have enough does. So in our spot, we're blessed in that, kind of blessed or cursed, right? A lot of my neighbors don't believe in doe management, so they don't shoot any. Therefore, we take extra. So any does
anyone's a good one for you.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, that's my strategy. But my strategy also is, if you're hunting an area that doesn't have a lot of deer, and I know I'm a hypocrite for saying this, but you lay off those big mamas. I would lay off them forever, because if you are worried about affecting how many deer you see, shoot a yearling doe.
Yeah.
You can time your watch to killing one in September if you want one, if you want two. Those are the ones that are going to disperse anyways. That would be a bit of advice for anybody who might be saying, I don't know if I should be shooting more than one.
And really, I mean, like if you're just doing doe management, don't shoot the first one that comes in. Let the 4 or 5 come in.
You know I'm going to do that.
Yeah, now
You know I'm shooting first.
I'm going to look at the social though. Like, so if one does have a fawn, yeah, I'll probably let that one go. And one doesn't have a fawn, I'm probably going to shoot her. Yeah. So,
all right, the more fodder for future podcasts. Brad, that's it. Thank you for all the insights as always. What we'd like to ask you to do is like and subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast, and then also check us out every Thursday. These drop every Thursday throughout the year. The Deer Talk Now podcast. For Brad Rucks, I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next week for another brand new episode. The Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by Mossberg, Wildlife Research Center, Traditions Firearms, Outdoor Edge Knives, Hoyt Archery, and 10 Point Crossbows.